Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we take a unique Australian perspective on motoring histories. In each episode, we find out how our feature car performed both on the road and in competition, and take an up-close look at an owner's example.
We'll also get a market update from the Shannons auctions team. So let's look back on the tough and spirited French sedan that won plenty of friends in Australia, the Simca Aronde.
Some car, this Simca, was one of the most memorable car advertisements of the day. It was 1960 and Chrysler Australia was assembling the brand new Aronde P60 and the bigger Vedette in Adelaide. Both were utterly French in character and yet quite different from a Peugeot 403 or Renault Dauphine, to name two French cars that were familiar to Australian motorists. With its side-valve Ford V8 engine, the Vedette was unique in a context of Holden's Mark II Zephyrs and the exciting new Ford Falcon. It looked great in white with a red flash and had a distinctive V8 rumble. Some car indeed. But at £1,495 to the Holden Special's $1,110, the Vedette was relatively pricey. Much more relevant was the Aronde, which the late, great Bill Tuckey described as the hoon car of the day. Mark, Tuckey used this term in his description of the inaugural Armstrong 500 at Phillip Island in 1960, in which there were numerous Arondes competing.
Well, he was right, of course. I mean, both the 90A and the P60 Arondes were quite spirited performers for their time. And even Modern Motor magazine tipped the P60 as a Phillip Island favourite following its road test prior to the big event in which they did so well, and which I'll expand on a bit later.
After the huge success of the FE station sedan, most manufacturers found themselves in need of a wagon. Chrysler Australia, with extensive experience of developing unique variants for the local market, created a very effective Aronde wagon, complete with a wind-down window in the tailgate. What a gem. The Aronde range also included a sporty Montelleri sedan with a higher compression version of the 1290cc engine, making an astonishing 70 brake horsepower, equal to an FB Holden. Hoon car indeed. The Aronde was the last Simca to be sold in Australia. It lingered on the new car price lists until well into 1964. By this time, of course, Chrysler Australia was busy with the Valiant, and doubtless many happy Aronde owners traded up to Chrysler's new hoon car. The Montelleri equalled the FB Holden's output, but the Valiant doubled it. In summary, the Aronde was a lion-hearted machine, a real goer. The top speed of the Montelleri was about 87 miles per hour, which was significantly better than an FB Holden's 82 and equal to the new Peugeot 404s. Surviving cars are very collectible, and the marque's proud history in the Armstrong 500 distinguishes it from all peers, except the redoubtable Peugeot 403. Some car, eh, Mark?
Yeah, some car, this Simca, that's what everyone was saying after its outstanding performance in the Armstrong 500. French manufacturers Citroën, Peugeot and Renault built some amazing cars in the 1950s and 60s, which all shared common traits of rugged durability, excellent ride quality on rough roads and outstanding performance in competition use, particularly long-distance events. However, there was another French marque, Simca, which shared all of those attributes and has its own proud history of competition success to show for it. Company founder Henry Theodore Pigozzi was determined to prove the speed and durability of his Aronde sedans right from the start, setting numerous high-speed endurance records in France in the 1950s. In Australia, the locally assembled 90A Aronde also proved a popular choice for crews competing in the gruelling Ampol and Mobil Gas long-distance trials. But it was in a new 500-mile race for stock standard road cars in 1960 that the Simca Aronde would shine brightest, John, ride quality and durability on rough roads, they were really high priorities for Aussie car buyers back then, weren't they?
Well, there was the outstanding precedent of the original Holden, with the 9 inches of ground clearance engineered into it. And a lot of those French cars had comparable ground clearance, and frankly, they were probably as tough as the Holden, but they handled much better on those rough roads. Yeah.
And rough roads were such a big factor because back in the 1950s and 60s, we didn't have anything like the amount of bitumen we've got now. Most roads were dirt roads.
That's right.
And a car that could cope with those sort of road conditions was, highly prized.
Well, a lot of those kinds of roads that were standard issue in those days are the kinds of roads that now you would want to take a four-wheel drive.
Exactly, it's changed, hasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, big time. The Simca Aronde holds the unique distinction amongst French cars of finishing first, second and third in the first running of Australia's greatest motor race, the Armstrong 500. This superb achievement occurred at Phillip Island in November 1960, when the Simcas dominated their class at a time when only class wins were awarded and no outright winner was officially recognised. 5 Simca Arondes were entered in Class B, with 3 of them backed by Chrysler Australia and entered under the names of their dealers, steered by some big names, including Red X trial winner Gelignite Jack Murray, who was promoting the French cars for Chrysler at the time. Against spirited competition from Triumph, Volkswagen, Renault and Ford rivals, 3 of the Arondes, led by the older 90A model, claimed a dominant trifecta, a convincing display of speed and endurance, which greatly enhanced the French car's already glowing reputation. Although Arondes continued to compete in the annual Armstrong 500, both at the island and after its move to Mount Panorama in 1963, the robust French cars were never able to repeat their stunning debut performance. The Simca Aronde's time in Australia was relatively brief, but its emphatic Armstrong 500 success will never be forgotten. Remember to join the Shannons Club, where you can connect with other enthusiasts around the country.
Hi, my name is Vince, and this is my Simca P60 1963 Monteleri. I've owned this car for about 4 or 5 years. Very, very original. It's full of patina and very original. That's just the way I found the car. It's an oddball. It's a completely built car in France. It still has a tag on the car. And the difference being with any other P60, the Monteleri had different roof line, two-tone paint, and it has a couple of different chrome moulds. When I found this P60, it was pretty much as you see it today. I fitted some sort of period type white wallish tyres, placed the head gasket, and we've done a radiator, and that's all I've done to the car. The big thing with the P60 was the 5-main bearing crank engine, which was made it fairly reliable. The P60 had some race history in Australia back in the 60s, and they were quite a competitive car in their day. I raced a P60 back in the early 70s in sports sedan. They're very, very reliable with the motor cars. I've been a Shannons member for 10 or 12 years. All my vehicles insured through Shannons. The support that Shannons gives the historic motoring boys is great. They've actually sold a couple of my cars over the years. A lot of club support, and yeah, I'm a great believer in what Shannons do. I own a few more Simcas apart from this one here, and we have 2 here today. One is a car that I restored some 10 or 12 years ago. It was, I suppose, a barn find, you could say. We found it in a paddock, and I restored it back to fairly original. This car here we found in a garage again. It was in pieces when we found it, but we decided to turn this vedette into a historic race car, and we got permission off CAMS to race the car in historics. It's the only one in the world that's racing. What I like about the Simca is it's the only one in Australia. It's the only Monteleri that anyone has ever seen. I think the car should be enjoyed for what it is, and being the rare thing that is in Australia, it really should be in the museum and be left as it is, I think.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borrabon joins us with some expert advice on the Simca Aronde. Hello, Chris.
Welcome, mate. The French car scene, it really is booming. And in that area, we talk about the big three, Renault, Peugeot, Citroën. Where does Simca fit in there in terms of that scene? It's an interesting question.
It's quite interesting, and I think it's probably one of those brands that we really don't see today. You don't hear much about the Simcas at all. Obviously they're popular in their day. They were a budget car and well
very
priced.
popular in Australia.
Yeah. But today I think if anything, if you can find any of the Arondes, they're probably held in private collections. We don't see any come up on a market through auctions. And again, in the classifieds also, it's not really something you see too much of. So I think it's probably through the car club, it's probably where it changes hands,
Yeah, but if you really want to view in the French car scene, as I say, it's thriving. If you really wanted a car to stand out, turning up with a Simca would be...
It'd be different,
right,
isn't it?
Some car, there's Simca.
That's right. So the cars are, of course, initially assembled in Melbourne, and then Chrysler took over assembly in South
Adelaide.
Australia. So would the earlier cars be more desirable, or the Chrysler assembled cars? Is there any differentiation there, you think?
I don't think there's enough really around these days, and there's probably not enough of a trend to indicate that on a marketplace to say, well, the earlier cars are probably more or less desirable than the later cars. Yeah, it's a very hard one.
It has amazed me on the Shannons Club the amount of response to the Simca stories we've written, and people remember back in the day, and Bill Tuckey described it as the hoon car of the era. Because the Aronde Montelari was really quite a powerful car.
Well, it was, and it became a very popular car amongst young drivers.
Yes,
second-hand, third-hand versions. So
indeed.
It's enough performance.
But the question is, when did you last see one on the road?
Oh,
Well, I haven't. I mean, you talk about rare Simca Arondes. The one built by Chrysler that they turned into a station wagon.
the station
Now
wagon.
that is unique to Australia. It
Unique,
was based on the sedan.
Yep.
They did their own back,
Using Chrysler Australia expertise.
even with a wind-up window on the tailgate.
Yes.
I mean, it was a beautiful bit of Australian ingenuity.
Absolutely.
And that is a car. I don't think I've ever seen one of those in the skin.
I don't think I have either.
No.
But look, it's fair to say there are not too many on the road. I mean, maybe there's still some out, in South Australia potentially.
Well, I was thinking most of them probably are in South Australia
Could be,
where they were built. Yeah.
But it would be a fantastic car to have and put in your shed, wouldn't it?
A great entry point level car, French
Yes,
car. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yeah,
And it's a point of difference too. It's something that's very
Indeed.
different that you don't see much of it all these days. Yeah.
So this is a difficult one for someone who wanted to buy a Simca Aronde in Australia. Where do they start? You're saying they're not coming across the auction blocks?
No, we're not seeing it for the auctions
Or
or
in the
classifieds.
classifieds.
Or the classified. So what do you have to sort of immerse yourself in the French car scene and then
I think
start
so.
to ask questions?
I think
from there?
it's finding the Simca clubs and obviously
And there are Simca clubs.
Yeah, there are, and again trying to immerse yourself with members there and actually sourcing out what's out there. And I'm sure you probably will find that someone who's actually got an Aronde probably has 2 or 3 of them.
I think that's quite likely, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a unique Australian classic. It's locally assembled. Yeah, very good.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today,
Thanks, mate.
Chris. And remember, you can get all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own race image of the Simca Aronde, visit AutoPix, Australia's largest motorsport photo archive.
John, looking back at the Simca Aronde, quintessentially French for that era, but there was a little bit of Italian in its DNA,
Well,
wasn't
the
there?
Simca from way back had basically built its own versions of Fiats. And I think it's perhaps not a hugely known fact that the Aronde actually used a sort of tweaked version of the Fiat 1100 engine. Yeah. And the 1100 was quite a good performing car for its day, especially when it first came out. That shape came out in '53, but the Aronde was just took it to the next level.
Yeah, it was a very spirited performer, wasn't
It
it?
certainly was.
That's good stuff.
We hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the car, this Simca Aronde, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV.